Life's greatest treasures aren't always found in bank accounts or possessions. Sometimes, they're discovered in the sacrifices we make for those we love. Today's story will take you on an emotional journey that spans 25 years, a tale of a father's ultimate sacrifice and the incredible way his selflessness came full circle. Before we dive in, I want you to imagine this. What would you give up for someone you love? Your home? Your career? Your dreams? For Thomas Woodson, a humble carpenter with calloused hands and a heart of gold, the answer was everything. Thomas lived in the small town of Millfield, known for its quaint streets and tight-knit community. His carpentry shop, though modest, was his pride and joy, a testament to decades of hard work and dedication. The shop's walls held stories within their wooden panels, each scratch and mark representing a memory, a struggle, a triumph, but more precious than his beloved workshop were his twin daughters, Lily and Rose. After losing his wife during childbirth, these girls became Thomas's entire world. Their infectious laughter filled the empty spaces of his heart, and their curious minds gave him purpose beyond his grief. As single father working tirelessly to provide, Thomas never imagined he would one day face an impossible choice: his lifelong passion or his daughters' futures. But life has a way of presenting us with moments that define who we are and what we stand for. This is the story of a father's love, a love so profound that it would echo through generations. This is the story of how one man's sacrifice changed not just two lives, but an entire community. And most importantly, this is the story of how, 25 years later, that sacrifice would come back to him in ways he could never have imagined. Thomas Woodson hadn't always been a carpenter. In his youth, he'd dreamed of becoming an architect, sketching elaborate buildings on any scrap of paper he could find. Born to working-class parents, college remained financially out of reach, but Thomas had always been good with his hands and had an eye for detail that seemed almost supernatural. At 19, he apprenticed with Old Man Jenkins, Millfield's master carpenter, known for crafting furniture so beautiful it brought tears to people's eyes. Under Jenkins' tutelage, Thomas learned that woodworking wasn't just about cuts and joins, it was about bringing life to something once living. The tree gives its life, Jenkins would say, and we give it purpose. For 7 years, Thomas absorbed everything from selecting the right wood by touch alone to creating intricate dovetail joints that could withstand generations of use. When Jenkins retired, he offered Thomas the opportunity to buy his shop through a payment plan that would take years to complete. "You're ready," Jenkins had said, placing his worn tape measure in Thomas's palm. "This shop needs someone who sees the soul in the grain." At 26, Thomas became the proud owner of Woodson's Fine Carpentry. The shop wasn't much a converted barn with high ceilings and windows that filtered sunlight across sawdust-covered floors, but it was his. Each morning, he would unlock the heavy wooden door, breathe in the comforting scent of pine and oak, and feel truly at home. It was in this chapter of his life that Thomas met Elizabeth, a kindergarten teacher with eyes that sparkled like sunlight on water. Their courtship was brief but profound. Within a year, they married in a ceremony where everything from the arch they stood under to the small boxes containing their rings was crafted by Thomas's loving hands. They dreamed of filling their modest home with children, laughter, and handmade furniture. Elizabeth would teach their children letters and numbers, while Thomas would teach them to see possibility in raw materials. They'd grow old watching their family expand, surrounded by the fruits of their complementary passions, but fate had other plans. When Elizabeth announced she was carrying twins, their joy knew no bounds. Thomas immediately began crafting 2 identical cribs, pouring his heart into every detail. However, complications arose in the 8th month of pregnancy. Despite the doctor's best efforts, Elizabeth slipped away shortly after delivering 2 healthy baby girls. Thomas named them Lily and Rose, as Elizabeth had wished 2 beautiful flowers from the same garden. Standing in the nursery surrounded by the furniture he'd made for a family that would never be complete, Thomas made a silent promise to his late wife: these girls would have everything they needed, even if it meant he'd have nothing left for himself. Gentle, playful music transitions in, raising twin girls as a single father was not without its challenges. The early years were a blur of midnight feedings, diaper changes, and learning to braid hair through YouTube tutorials. Thomas would carry the twins in a custom-built double sling strapped to his chest while he worked in the shop, their tiny faces dusted with fine sawdust despite his best efforts to keep them clean. His sister Marion would help when she could, showing him how to properly button tiny dresses and detangle fine hair without tears. But mostly, it was just Thomas and his girls against the world, figuring things out one day at a time. By age 5, Lily and Rose were fixtures in the carpentry shop, their matching overalls covered in colorful chalk marks as they drew on scraps of wood. Though identical in appearance, both with their mother's chestnut hair and bright eyes, their personalities couldn't have been more different. Lily was methodical and precise, spending hours arranging wood shavings into complex patterns. She would follow Thomas around the shop, asking endless questions about measurements and angles. "Why does this piece need to be exactly 7 inches, Daddy?" she would ask, her small face serious beneath her safety goggles. Rose, on the other hand, was a whirlwind of energy and imagination. Where Lily saw building materials, Rose saw possibilities. A simple block of wood might become a castle, a spaceship, or a magical creature in her hands. "Look, Daddy," she would exclaim, holding up a roughly shaped piece. "It's us on an adventure." Despite their differences, the twins shared an extraordinary bond and a remarkable intelligence that became increasingly evident as they started school. Their kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Patterson, pulled Thomas aside during their first parent-teacher conference. "Mr. Woodson," she said, her voice low with sincerity, "I've been teaching for 30 years, and I've never seen minds like these. Your daughters have exceptional potential." As the twins progressed through elementary school, their academic achievements continued to impress. Lily displayed an uncanny aptitude for mathematics and science, solving problems meant for children twice her age. Rose excelled in language and art, writing stories and creating illustrations that brought her teachers to tears. By the time they reached middle school, both girls were consistently at the top of their class. Their science fair projects won regional competitions. Their essays were published in youth magazines. Teachers began whispering about college scholarships and special programs. Thomas watched with a mixture of pride and concern. His business provided enough for their modest lifestyle: food on the table, clothes on their backs, a roof over their heads. But higher education was another matter entirely. He'd started a college fund when they were born, adding what he could each month, but it was nowhere near enough for one college education, let alone 2. Still, he encouraged their dreams, never letting his financial worries dampen their enthusiasm. When Lily talked about becoming a doctor, he built her a miniature examination table for her stuffed animals. When Rose described the architectural wonders she would design someday, he helped her construct elaborate structures from scrap wood and cardboard. At night, after tucking the girls into bed, Thomas would sit at his worn kitchen table, calculator in hand, trying to make numbers work that simply wouldn't. The local community college was an option, but even that would stretch their resources thin. As the twins entered their freshman year of high school, Thomas faced the harsh reality that his carpentry business alone wouldn't be enough to give his daughters the future they deserved. Something would have to give. When Lily and Rose turned 15, they were invited to participate in an elite academic program at the local high school, a partnership with the state university that would put them on an accelerated path toward college credits. The program was prestigious, competitive, and most importantly, opened doors to substantial university scholarships. There was just one catch: the program required a significant financial commitment for specialized materials, educational trips, and participation fees. For many families, the amount might have been manageable with some budgeting. For Thomas, it represented an impossible sum. One autumn evening, as golden light filtered through the shop windows, Thomas sat on his workbench staring at the program paperwork. The twins had gone to a study group, giving him rare moments of solitude to think. His fingers traced the grain of the oak beneath him, what he knew as intimately as his own reflection. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Richard Bennett, a wealthy developer from the neighboring city who had commissioned several pieces from Thomas over the years. "Hope I'm not interrupting," Richard said, admiring a half-finished dining table. "Your work just keeps getting better, Thomas." "Thank you, sir. What can I do for you today?" Richard clasped his hands behind his back and paced the shop floor. "I'll be direct. I'm opening a furniture showroom in the city. High-end, artisanal pieces. I want to buy your shop, your equipment, your inventory, everything. Thomas blinked in surprise. This shop isn't for sale, Mr. Bennett. Everyone has a price, Thomas. Richard handed him a folded check. That's mine. The sum written on the paper made Thomas's hands tremble. It was enough to pay for the twins' academic program, their college educations, and still have something left over. It was also more money than he'd ever seen in his life. I need to think about this, Thomas stammered. Of course. But don't think too long. Offer expires at the end of the month. With a nod, Richard left, the bell above the door jingling in his wake. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. The shop had been his life for over 15 years. Every tool had been selected with care, every workbench positioned perfectly for his height and workflow. The morning light through the east windows, the way sound resonated against the high ceiling, the comforting smell of wood shavings, these weren't things that could be replaced. More than that, the shop was his identity. Without it, who was Thomas Woodson? Just a man with calloused hands and a fading skill set. For 3 days, he agonized over the decision, saying nothing to the twins. On the 4th day, he received a letter from the school counselor, gently reminding him that the program deposits were due by the end of the week, and without them, the spots would go to students on the waiting list. That evening, as they sat eating spaghetti at their small kitchen table, Lily mentioned casually that her biology teacher thought she could have a future in medical research. She says there are scholarships I could apply for in a couple of years, Lily explained, twirling pasta around her fork. Rose nodded enthusiastically. And my English teacher is helping me prepare a portfolio for architecture programs. She says I have a unique perspective. Thomas looked at his daughters, so bright, so full of potential, so unaware of the financial realities that threatened to clip their wings before they could truly fly. In that moment, his decision crystallized with painful clarity. The next morning, he called Richard Bennett. I'll sell, he said, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. But I have conditions. Bennett agreed to his terms. Thomas would stay on as an employee for 1 year to help with the transition. He would complete all existing client commitments. And most importantly, the business would maintain its ethical practices, using sustainably sourced wood and fair pricing. When Thomas finally told the twins about his decision, he framed it as an exciting new chapter, a partnership that would allow him more time to focus on special projects while providing financial stability. He didn't mention the true cost or that he would eventually be just another employee in a shop that once bore his name. But Daddy, you love your shop, Rose said, her intuition cutting through his carefully constructed explanation. I love you too more, he replied simply. Some things are worth more than others. The papers were signed the following week. Thomas Woodson was no longer a business owner, but his daughters' futures were secure. Music shifts to a more somber, determined tone. The year working under Bennett's management was harder than Thomas had anticipated. What had once been a space of creativity and craftsmanship quickly transformed into a production line focused on quantity over quality. Thomas watched helplessly as his former sanctuary became unrecognizable. High-end machinery replaced lovingly maintained hand tools, and pre-cut lumber from dubious sources replaced the carefully selected hardwoods he'd personally sourced from local mills. Worst of all were the designs. Gone were the thoughtful pieces that honored the natural beauty of the wood. Instead, they now mass-produced whatever trendy styles the market demanded, often with unnecessary embellishments that Thomas found borderline offensive to the material. The customers don't care about the soul of the wood, Bennett would say whenever Thomas objected. They care about having something that looks expensive in their dining room. Each day felt like a small death, but Thomas persevered, reminding himself of the purpose behind his sacrifice. The twins were thriving in their advanced program, bringing home projects and papers that amazed him with their depth and insight. Their excitement about learning was worth every moment of his discomfort. When his year of employment ended, Thomas declined Bennett's offer to stay on. Instead, he took a maintenance position at the high school, fixing broken desks and lockers, repairing classroom cabinets, and handling general woodworking needs around the campus. The pay was significantly less than what he'd earned as a shop owner, but the schedule allowed him to be home when the twins returned from school. Their modest house, once filled with beautiful custom furniture, gradually changed as Thomas sold his finest pieces to help cover expenses. Each sale felt like parting with an old friend, but he reminded himself that they were just things, beautiful things, yes, but not as important as his daughter's education. On weekends, Thomas would set up a small workbench in the garage, maintaining his connection to woodworking through small projects. Sometimes the twins would join him, Lily calculating dimensions while Rose sketched designs. These simple moments became his sanctuary, reminders of what mattered most. The twins, now in their junior year of high school, were beginning to understand the magnitude of their father's sacrifice. They noticed the long hours he worked, the way he stretched every dollar, the absence of new clothes or personal indulgences in his life. One evening, Rose found her father at the kitchen table, surrounded by scholarship applications and financial aid forms. "Dad," she said softly, sitting beside him. "We can go to community college first. Save some money." Thomas looked up, startled. "Absolutely not. You and your sister have earned these opportunities, and you're going to take them." "But the cost is not your concern," he interrupted gently. "My job is to worry about money. Your job is to learn everything you can and make something of yourselves. That's the deal." Rose's eyes filled with tears. "It's not fair to you." Thomas took her hand, his calluses rough against her smooth skin. "Fair has nothing to do with it. This is what parents do, Rosie. We plant trees knowing we might never sit in their shade." Similar conversations happened with Lily, who proposed taking a gap year to work and save money. Thomas was equally firm with her. They would go to college immediately after high school, and they would choose schools based on programs, not price tags. By the time the twins graduated as co-valedictorians of their class, Thomas had managed to secure enough financial aid, scholarships, and loans to send them to prestigious universities on opposite coasts. Lily would study biochemistry at a research powerhouse in Boston, while Rose was accepted to an architecture program in California known for its innovative approach. The day he drove them to the airport was perhaps the hardest of Thomas's life, harder even than selling his beloved shop. As he hugged them goodbye, he whispered the same message to each: "Fly as high as your wings will take you. Don't look back worrying about me." When he returned to their half-empty house, Thomas sat in his worn armchair and allowed himself, for the first time since selling his shop, to weep, not from sadness, but from a complex mixture of pride, exhaustion, and the bittersweet realization that he had done exactly what he'd set out to do. His girls were on their way, music shifts to an uplifting, determined tempo, college presented new challenges for the twins, who had never been separated before. They spoke daily, sharing stories of intimidating professors, demanding coursework, and the culture shock of being surrounded by students from privileged backgrounds who took their education for granted. Lily thrived in the structured environment of laboratory work, her methodical mind perfectly suited to the precision of scientific research. By her sophomore year, she had secured a position in a renowned professor's lab studying regenerative medicine, a field that fascinated her with its potential to heal broken bodies. Rose found her voice in the creative chaos of the architecture studio, where her unique perspective caught the attention of mentors who encouraged her to blend artistic expression with practical solutions. Her designs incorporated natural elements and sustainable materials, influenced by years of watching her father honor the inherent beauty of wood. Both sisters worked part-time jobs despite their demanding academic schedules, Lily as a teaching assistant in the biology department, Rose designing websites for local businesses. Every dollar they earned that wasn't needed for books or essentials was sent home to their father, despite his protests that they should keep their money. "We're investing in our future," Thomas would say when the small checks arrived. "So did you," Lily would reply. "Now it's our turn." Through their undergraduate years, both twins maintained stellar grades while building impressive resumes. They applied for and received prestigious internships, Lily at a biotech firm developing artificial organs, Rose at an architectural firm specializing in environmentally responsive design. Their paths diverged further in graduate school. Lily pursued an MD-PhD program, determined to bridge the gap between medical practice and cutting-edge research. Her focus narrowed to regenerative treatments for spinal cord injuries. Inspired by a patient she met during her hospital rotations, Rose earned a master's in architecture with an emphasis on community-centered design, developing a thesis project that reimagined public spaces to foster connection across socio-economic divides. Her professors noted her unusual ability to merge beauty with functionality, creating spaces that felt both inspiring and accessible. Through it all, they maintained close contact with their father through weekly video calls. Thomas never complained about his circumstances, instead filling their conversations with questions about their studies and encouragement for their aspirations. If he was struggling financially or emotionally, he kept it well hidden behind his proud smile. What the twins didn't see were the nights Thomas spent applying heat pads to his aching back after long days of maintenance work. They didn't know that he had downsized to a smaller apartment to reduce expenses, or that he sometimes took odd carpentry jobs on weekends to make ends meet. They didn't realize that the cheerful demeanor he showed them took considerable effort to maintain. As the years passed, the twins established themselves in their respective fields. Lily completed her dual degree and began a promising research career at a medical center in Boston, publishing papers on innovative treatments that caught the attention of the scientific community. Rose joined a forward-thinking architectural firm in San Francisco, quickly gaining recognition for designs that harmonized with natural environments while addressing community needs. Success brought financial stability, allowing both women to repay their student loans ahead of schedule and begin building savings. They separately reached out to their father's old friends in Millfield, discreetly checking on his well-being and learning things he would never tell them himself: how his hands had begun to develop arthritis, how he rarely did woodworking anymore because of the pain, how he had given up his dream of retiring to a small cabin where he could create furniture for pleasure rather than profit. As their 25th birthday approached, marking nearly 25 years since Thomas had sold his beloved carpentry shop, Lily and Rose began a series of secret phone calls, planning something that would change all their lives. It was time, they agreed, to come home and repay the debt they could never truly repay. Music builds with emotional anticipation. Thomas Woodson's alarm clock buzzed at 5:30 a.m., just as it had every workday for the past 20-something years. At 63, his body protested the early hour more than it once had, joints stiff and muscles reluctant to engage. Still, he swung his legs over the side of the bed and began his day with the discipline that had characterized his entire life. His apartment was small but tidy: one bedroom, a modest living area, and a kitchen barely large enough for a two-person table. The walls were adorned with framed photographs chronicling his daughter's achievements, graduations, award ceremonies, professional milestones. Their success was the decoration that brought him the most joy. As he prepared his simple breakfast, Thomas glanced at the calendar. Today marked exactly 25 years since he'd signed the papers selling his shop to Richard Bennett. He hadn't kept track intentionally, but some dates simply imprinted themselves on the soul. Bennett's artisanal furniture showroom had lasted barely 5 years before being sold to a corporate chain that further industrialized the production. Now the old barn housed a trendy coffee shop, all exposed beams and reclaimed wood, with not a single piece actually crafted on the premises. Thomas avoided walking past it whenever possible. His phone rang as he was washing his breakfast dishes, an unusual occurrence this early. The screen showed Rose's name. "Morning, sweetheart," he answered, smiling. "Isn't it about 3 a.m. in California?" "Hi, Daddy," Rose replied, her voice bright despite the hour. "I'm actually not in California right now. Could you come to the old shop location? The coffee place?" Thomas frowned. "The coffee shop? Are you in town? Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" "Please, Dad. I'll explain everything when you get here." Confused but intrigued, Thomas agreed. He changed from his maintenance uniform into his one good shirt and slacks. If Rose was home, he wanted to look his best and drove the short distance to Main Street. The morning was unseasonably warm for April, sunlight already brightening the storefronts as early risers began their day. Thomas parked his aging pickup truck in front of what had once been Woodson's fine carpentry, steeling himself for the familiar pang of loss that always accompanied visits to this location. The coffee shop appeared closed, its windows dark despite the open sign in the door. Hesitantly, Thomas tried the handle. It turned easily in his grip. As he stepped inside, the scent hit him first, not coffee beans and pastries, but wood. Fresh-cut pine, oak, cherry, and maple. The distinctive, unmistakable smell of a working carpentry shop. The interior was dark except for a single spotlight illuminating the center of the room. There, standing side by side with matching nervous smiles, were Lily and Rose, no longer the teenagers who had left for college, but accomplished women in their early 40s, the lines around their eyes speaking of years of focused work and genuine laughter. Surprise, they said in unison, their childhood habit of synchronized speech apparently not entirely forgotten. "What is this?" Thomas asked, looking around in confusion. "What have you two done?" Lily stepped forward, taking her father's weathered hand. "First, we want you to know that we've understood for a long time what you sacrificed for us. Selling this shop wasn't just a business decision, it was giving up your identity, your passion. Your entire world," Rose added, moving to his other side. "All so we could have the opportunities you never had." Thomas swallowed hard, emotion tightening his throat. "I would do it again in a heartbeat. Look at what you've both accomplished." "We know," Lily smiled. "That's why we did this." Rose reached for a light switch, and suddenly the entire space was illuminated. What had been a trendy coffee shop was now, impossibly, a fully equipped woodworking studio. Workbenches positioned exactly as Thomas had once arranged them. Tools both power and hand organized on walls and in cabinets. Slabs of premium hardwood stacked carefully in racks. In the corner stood a small office area with a computer and drafting table. Thomas stared in disbelief. "I don't understand." "We bought it back," Rose explained. "When the coffee shop owner decided to retire last year, we made an offer he couldn't refuse. But the renovation has been happening secretly for months," Lily continued. "We hired local contractors who worked nights and early mornings. Everyone in town kept the secret because they love you, Dad." Thomas moved slowly through the space, running his fingers along a workbench that matched the dimensions of his old one perfectly. "This must have cost a fortune." The twins exchanged glances. "We've both done well," Rose said simply. "This is an investment in our family legacy." "But I can't, my hands aren't what they used to be," Thomas protested weakly, the arthritis in his joints a constant reminder of his limitations. Lily smiled. "That's where phase 2 comes in. Music softens to a gentle, emotional melody." "Phase 2?" Thomas repeated, overwhelmed by what he was seeing. Rose gestured toward the office area. "We're not just giving you back your shop, Dad. We're proposing a partnership. Woodson and Daughters Fine Carpentry. I've taken a position at Millfield Medical Center," Lily explained. "They're establishing a research division focused on regenerative medicine, and they've given me substantial funding to build a team. And I've accepted a professorship at the State University's Architecture Department," Rose added. "I'll be developing a new program centered on sustainable design and community spaces." Thomas looked between his daughters in disbelief. "You're both moving back to Millfield?" "But your careers, your lives, are evolving, not ending," Lily assured him. "We've spent 20 years establishing ourselves in our fields. Now we get to bring that knowledge back home. The shop will be a working studio and teaching space," Rose continued, her excitement evident. "I'll bring architecture students here to learn about materials and craftsmanship. Lily's researchers will study the therapeutic benefits of working with natural materials. And you, Dad," Lily said softly, "will be the master craftsman who guides it all when your hands allow. When they don't, you'll have apprentices to do the heavy work while benefiting from your expertise." Thomas sank onto a nearby stool, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," the twins replied in unison. "There's one more thing," Rose added, reaching behind a workbench to retrieve a small wooden box one Thomas recognized immediately as his own handiwork from decades ago. Inside lay an old, worn tape measure, the same one old man Jenkins had pressed into his palm when passing the shop to him all those years ago. Mr. Bennett kept it, Lily explained. When he sold the business, he took it home rather than letting it go to the corporate buyers. His son returned it when he heard what we were doing. Thomas took the tape measure with trembling hands, his vision blurring with unshed tears. You girls didn't have to do this. Yes, we did, Rose said firmly. You taught us that some things are worth more than others. You showed us through your actions what truly matters. 25 years ago, you gave up everything so we could find our paths, Lily added. Now we're choosing a path that leads back to you. Thomas looked around the shop, his shop, reborn, and let the tears fall freely. I never expected, that was never the point of your sacrifice, Rose said gently. You gave without expectation of return. That's what made it so precious. In that moment, surrounded by the scent of fresh wood and the love of his daughters, Thomas understood that his life had come full circle. The sacrifice that had broken his heart had ultimately led to this unexpected rebirth, not just of his beloved shop, but of his sense of purpose. When do we open? He asked finally, a smile breaking through his tears. The twins beamed. How about today? Music swells triumphantly but tenderly. The grand reopening of Woodson and Daughters' fine carpentry became something of a town celebration. Residents who remembered Thomas's original shop brought photographs and stories to share. Former clients commissioned new pieces to complement the heirlooms they'd purchased decades earlier. In the years that followed, the shop became more than just a business. It evolved into a community center where craft, science, and design intersected in surprising ways. Lily's research on the therapeutic effects of woodworking for patients with chronic pain conditions gained national attention. Rose's architecture students created innovative public installations that transformed neglected spaces throughout Millfield, and Thomas, despite his arthritis, found renewed purpose teaching a new generation to see the soul in the grain, just as Old Man Jenkins had taught him so many years before. The greatest lesson, perhaps, was one that spread beyond the walls of the shop. That sacrifices made from love create ripples that continue long after the initial stone is cast into the waters of time. That what we give up may return to us in forms we never imagined. And that the most valuable inheritance we leave our children is not what we accumulate, but what we are willing to surrender for their sake.